109. What do you mean you lost the keys? You knew spring break was mine? She snapped.
And just like that, 5 years of co-parenting went up in flames. Narrator, neutral tone, slightly sarcastic. Dan Carson stood outside his ex-wife's suburban driveway, fumbling through the pockets of his weather-beaten jeans. Narrator, dry humor. He wasn't here to fight, just grab the boat keys, pick up their daughter Sophie, and head to Lake Ozark for spring break. That was the plan. But then Emily stepped outside. Emily, faux cheerful tone. Oh hey Dan, you remember spring break, right? The one you forgot to confirm in writing? Dan muttering. What are you talking about? We discussed this a month ago. Narrator, judgmental tone. They had, sort of, in a rushed text thread sandwiched between passive-aggressive emojis and calendar confusion. But here's the thing about divorced parents. What's agreed upon is always open to revision. Emily crossed her arms. Emily coldly. Anyway, I need the speedboat keys. Sophie's not going anywhere until I get them. Dan, stunned. You're holding my daughter hostage over a boat? Narrator, dramatic pause. Cue the flashpoint. Dan stepped toward the car, voice sharp now. Dan, I gave you the boat, Em. You said you didn't want it. Emily, raising an eyebrow. I changed my mind.
You said you had the keys. Dan, fuming. I don't know what you're talking about.
Emily, smirking. Spring break? Whoops, I don't know what you're talking about. Narrator, biting sarcasm. Ah, the sacred ritual of divorced parent revenge. Passive aggression in its purest suburban form. Dan's jaw clenched. His fist slammed the car hood, lightly, but enough to make Emily flinch. Dan, low voice, cancel the trip and I'll file for full custody. I mean it. Narrator mocked cheerfully, and there it was, the nuclear option. Deployed over a $300 speedboat in a silent grudge from 2019. Emily blinked. For a second something softer flickered in her eyes. Then she straightened her posture. Emily coldly. Sophie staying with me. We'll see you in court, Dan. Narrator slow, deliberate. Meanwhile, behind the living room curtains, 13-year-old Sophie watched in silence, holding her packed bag, spring break dreams, and a heart quietly breaking. Narrator, dramatic cliffhanger tone. She hadn't picked this war, but she was already its collateral damage. Spring break wasn't the problem. It was the years of resentment they buried under polite co-parenting, and now, the cracks were showing through every text, every silence. Narrator, calm but edged with tension. Emily sat across from her lawyer in a downtown St. Louis office that smelled faintly of old coffee and reheated arguments. Lawyer, pragmatic tone. You're under no legal obligation to give him spring break this year. Nothing's on paper. Emily nodded. She knew that, but her jaw was tight, her coffee untouched. She wasn't there for advice. She was there for justification. Emily muttering. He threatened full custody, over boat keys. Narrator, dry sarcasm, which in family court terms was the equivalent of launching a nuclear bomb over a lawnmower. But it wasn't about the keys. It never was. Cut to Sophie. Upstairs in her room, ear pressed to the vent. She could hear voices below. Not angry shouting, just the kind of hushed tension that sticks to walls in kids' memories. Narrator, softer, emotional tone. She'd packed and repacked twice. Her spring break suitcase now sat by the door. Half close, half hope. But after hearing her mom say custody, the zipper stayed open. Back in the lawyer's office. Lawyer, do you want to fight back? Emily, quiet. I just want to win. Narrator, firm tone. There it was. Not about Sophie. Not about fairness. About winning. A reflex from years of hurt that still stung when prodded. The lawyer slid a form across the table. Lawyer, you could block the trip, temporarily, just to make a point. Narrator, judgmental tone. Because that's what spring break was now. A point to be made. Sophie's vacation, reduced to leverage. Emily hesitated, then signed. That night, Dan opened an envelope on his porch. Dan, reading aloud, Sophie will remain in my custody this spring break. The arrangement is being reconsidered. Narrator, bitter humor. Reconsidered, huh? As if this were a coupon code that expired. Dan crushed the letter in his hand, and for the first time in 5 years, he thought about calling his lawyer. Meanwhile, Sophie sat in her room, trying not to cry as her group chat buzzed about bikinis, playlists, and lake selfies that now wouldn't include her. Narrator, emotional, direct to viewer. She didn't care about the boat. She didn't even care about the trip. She just wanted her parents to stop using her as a battlefield. Cliffhanger. Last line. As Dan dialed a number with shaking hands, he whispered time to even the score. In that courtroom, it wasn't about the boat, or spring break. It was about every apology they never made and every wound they never healed. Narrator courtroom atmosphere. Quiet tension. The courtroom was sterile, cold, like a hospital for broken families. Emily and Dan sat on opposite sides, avoiding eye contact. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut, glanced through the case file. Judge, flatly, so let me get this straight. A boat dispute turned into a spring break cancellation and now a custody motion. Dan cleared his throat. Dan, defensive. It's not about the boat, Your Honor, it's about consistency, stability. Narrator judgmental tone. Funny. Stability had rarely shown up in Dan's parenting style until now. Emily jumped in. Emily bitterly. He threatened custody over a weekend. That's not co-parenting, that's bullying. Narrator dry humor. Ah yes, the old he started at defense, a classic. The judge sighed, setting the file down like a bird. Judge, pointedly. Do either of you actually think this is helping Sophie? Both parents paused. It was the first time her name had been said aloud. Cut to Sophie, waiting in the hallway outside, earbuds in, listening to nothing, just trying to block out the silence inside her own head. Narrator emotional tone. She hadn't asked for any of this, not the lawyer letters, not the glares exchanged over drop-offs, not the feeling of being passed around like an obligation. Inside the courtroom, judge, firm, compassionate. You two aren't bad people, you're just stubborn people who lost the plot. Let me remind you, this isn't about punishment, it's about parenting. Emily's voice cracked. Emily soft, tearful. I didn't mean to cancel her trip. I just got scared he'd take her from me. Dan looked over. His voice dropped. Dan, I never planned to file. I was just angry. She knew how to push my butt. Narrator reflectively. And just like that, the walls started to come down, brick by bitter brick. Judge, sarcastic bite. Well, congratulations. You've both made a spring break memory that'll stick for years. Not for the lake, but for the fallout. Dan laughed. Emily smiled weakly. Narrator emotional wrap-up tone. In the end, the judge ordered shared custody over breaks, and told both parents to grow up, without mincing words. Outside, Sophie stepped between her parents' eyes, cautious but curious. Sophie, softly, so am I still grounded? They laughed, a little too loud, a little too relieved. Closing line, cliffhanger, resolution style. As they walked to the parking lot, Dan offered Emily the boat keys finally found. She stared for a moment, then took them with a smirk.